You know, it's pretty rare for a company to get so big, so iconic, that its name actually becomes a verb, a part of our everyday language. For decades, one name was basically the definition of photography itself, Kodak. So how on earth did a giant like that completely miss the boat on the future?
I mean, their influence was just massive. You've probably heard the phrase, a Kodak moment, right? It became this go-to way of saying, hey, this moment is special. This is one for the photo album. It was more than just marketing. It was part of our culture.
So what happened? We all kind of feel like we know the story, but it's still just mind-boggling. How does a company that was photography for an entire century just fail to see what's coming next in its own backyard?
All right, so to really get the fall, we've got to understand just how high they climbed. And it all goes back to this brilliant, simple idea from the founder, George Eastman.
And that slogan, you press the button, we do the rest, that wasn't just catchy, it was a total revolution. See, before Kodak, taking a picture was this messy, expensive, complicated thing only for pros. But Eastman comes along and says, look, for 25 bucks you get a camera with 100 photos in it. When you're done, you just mail the whole camera back to us. For 10 bucks more, we send you back your printed photos, the negatives, and your camera all loaded up with fresh film. It was absolutely genius.
And the business model behind this was just killer. It's what we now call the razor and blades model. Eastman figured out super early on that the big money wasn't in selling the cameras, the razors. Nope. The real cash cow was selling the film and the developing over and over and over again. Those are the blades. It locked customers in and just printed money for decades.
And we're talking about a staggering amount of money. At their peak, right around 1996, Kodak was bringing in $16 billion a year. That's billion with a B. This wasn't just a company, it was an absolute monster of an enterprise.
Seriously, Kodak was more than just a successful business. It was a pillar of the American economy, a core part of the Dow Jones for over 70 years. They give us classic cameras like the Brownie and the Instamatic. They were the ones supplying the film that literally built Hollywood. And get this, by 1976, they had something like 90% of all film sales in the US. They didn't just have a market share, they were the market.
Okay, but here's where the story gets absolutely wild. This is the big, ironic twist. The very thing that would eventually kill Kodak, it wasn't invented by some rival company, in some Silicon Valley garage. No way. It was invented right inside Kodak's own R&D labs.
So let's go back in time. The year is 1975. Kodak is on top of the world. And deep inside one of their labs, there's this young engineer just kind of fiddling around with a new invention.
Yep, you heard that right. A Kodak engineer named Steven Sasson builds the world's first digital camera. Now, it was a beast, okay? It was the size of a toaster. Took 23 seconds to snap one grainy black and white picture onto a cassette tape. But it worked. It was the first one. And when he shows it to the bosses, you know what they said? Their reaction is legendary. They basically said, that's cute, now don't tell a soul about it. They literally held the future in their hands and told him to go hide it in a closet.
So why on earth would they do that? Well, it's because this little toaster-sized camera created a massive billion-dollar problem for them. It was a dilemma that basically froze the company's leadership for years.
Think about it like this. On one hand, you have film. It's their baby, it has huge profit margins, they have total control of the market, it's a guaranteed gold mine. That's the present. But then, on the other hand, you have this new digital thing. The profits look tiny, there's going to be tons of competition. It's the future, sure, but it looks way, way less profitable than what they've already got. So, faced with that choice, they chose to protect the present. They doubled down on film.
But here's the thing, you can't just put the future in a closet and hope it goes away. While Kodak was stuck, basically paralyzed by how successful their film business was, that digital wave they tried to ignore just kept getting bigger and bigger. And other companies, well, they started to notice.
And funnily enough, the first big punch didn't even come from a digital camera company. It came from their old film rival, Fujifilm. They came storming into the US market in the 80s, even managed to snag the sponsorship for the '84 LA Olympics, which was a huge deal. Then they started a nasty price war that really started to hurt Kodak's bottom line. In just 1 year, 97, Kodak's market share dropped by over 5%. You could really start to see the cracks forming.
And once the fall started, man, it was fast. It was just shockingly quick. From that high point of $16 billion in 96, it was all downhill. By 2004, they get kicked out of the Dow Jones after being in it for 74 years. And then, the final blow, 2012, the unthinkable. Eastman Kodak, this American icon, files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Just the end of an era.
But believe it or not, that's not where the story ends. The company actually survived, but it had to become something completely different.
So Kodak came out of bankruptcy in 2013, but it was a much, much smaller company. They got rid of all those old businesses and decided to focus on things like commercial digital printing. And here's another irony for you. They are still the last big company making actual motion picture film for Hollywood. For the most part, though, when you see the Kodak name today, it's probably been licensed to another company that's making, you guessed it, digital cameras.
And their modern logo? It's a throwback to their famous 1971 design. It's a little reminder that the brand is still alive, even if the company is just a shadow of what it once was. It's a survivor, for sure.
So when you boil it all down, Kodak wasn't really killed by another company. It was killed by its own success. It was just too hard for them to let go of the incredibly profitable present to embrace a really uncertain future. And that leaves us with a really big question, right? What's today's film versus digital dilemma? What cash cow are the big giants of our time protecting so fiercely that they might be ignoring the very thing that's going to make them irrelevant down the road?